Dr. Müge Hocam to our last event. So we will be very happy to listen to you, Hocam. Thank you for your contribution. We were looking forward to hearing from you a lot. So I don't want to take a lot of time, and I would like to give the stage to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Hocam and dear Özgün. Thank you very much for the nice and kind introductions. But this is quite a nice, special day for me as well, being here and being able to speak to you all. Virtual exchange is dear to my heart, and I've been studying computer-mediated communication for language learning and teaching purposes specifically for a while now, since 2003, 2004, when I started my master's studies. So it's been a while, and it's so exciting to see the development in the field. Although COVID has been quite a challenge for everyone, it had the silver clouding in a way for virtual exchange. People didn't think online interactions would be possible, or it would give us educational experiences. Some people thought it was a difficult technology to work with, but it's quite nice to see that there are now more people engaging with it and used to having video conferences. I'm sorry that it's 6 p.m. and quite late for you there. That's one of the main challenges in virtual exchange, especially for synchronous interaction. If you want to connect to people who are in different time zones, how do you then make sure that people are not up late at night, or they're not up very early, especially if you want to have exchanges, for example, like in Japan or the west coast of the USA with Turkey, then the whole time zone clashes, and it kind of sometimes is a limiting perspective. But without further ado, I think I'll, if that's okay, share with you my slides. As I was trying to say a minute ago, if there is anything you would like me to talk more on, or if you want me to stop talking about, I may not be able to monitor the chat, but our moderators, Özgün, I believe it might be able to kind of feel free to interrupt using your audio, and anybody else as well. Feel free to say whether you have a question, and we can stop there. I will be talking about a little bit of an overview on the virtual exchange, but then I will, in the analysis and the data, I will like to specifically focus on multimodal self-representation. Multimodal analysis and meaning making is also another area that is very dear to me in terms of research, and I have recently started using social semiotics. So I'll be very happy and keen to hear your perspectives on these. I'm currently a lecturer at Newcastle University. I'm also the director for Global for our School of Education, Communication and Language Sciences. And outside of my day job, or outside the university, I used to be second publications officer at Collaboration. We have now gone through re-elections, and I got elected as a general council member, and we're currently trying to organize the management board so that we can redistribute the roles. But I continue to be the co-editor of Journal of Virtual Exchange with Carolyn Fuchs. This is our 5th year since 2018, and we are receiving more and more submissions every year. The journal is an interdisciplinary space. So if you have any work, any papers that you would like to submit, we will be very willing to have them, send them out to review. We have research articles, but we also have practice reports that is more geared towards practitioners. I was also quite lucky to host the International Virtual Exchange Conference in 2020, and we have published some of the presentations there in a book format, open access book format, and we also have a special issue in the Journal of Virtual Exchange. Next year's IVEC conference is in Spain. I believe abstract submissions have now closed, but if you want to follow it up online, I think attendance will be blended, so you will be able to attend either in Spain or online. So keep an eye on the IVEC platform as well. And this is the website for Collaboration. It does say it's a cross-disciplinary organization for telecollaboration and virtual exchange in higher education, but we are aware that quite a lot of the exchanges are actually happening in colleges or secondary schools, sometimes even in primary schools. So probably with the new management board and the new general council, we might be likely to drop in higher education, and we want to be more inclusive of the practice across the field. So if your practice is on virtual exchanges between secondary school students, do send it into the journal. We do have that broader perspective. We're not necessarily only looking for virtual exchange in higher education, but we do have that broader perspective. So here is the outline. I would like to briefly talk about what virtual exchange is and its role in internationalization in higher education. And I will then exemplify one of my practice for TESOL teacher training, which is curriculum embedded. And we're using that data for multimodal self-representation and showing you how I deal with, very briefly, with the social semiotic analysis, but not into detail because I know you may not all be working with social semiotics. And I'd like to conclude with some of the opportunities and challenges it poses, especially looking at equality, diversity, and inclusion. If that's okay, very quickly, here is the definition of virtual exchange. So Robert Adult defined it in 2020. Well, it's not his own definition. It's actually a wider group of scholars who have come up with this definition as part of the EU projects, but that's a quote from his paper. So a virtual exchange involves the engagement of groups of learners in extended periods of online intercultural interaction and collaboration with international peers as an integrated part of their educational programs and under the guidance of educators and or facilitators. So it's quite important that there is a learner-to-learner contact. It's not about a lecturer coming in and giving a seminar, or it's not about students who do collaboration in the wider perspectives and not thinking of intercultural elements, but it is where learners come together in extended periods of time, and they do have a focus on intercultural and global interactions and communication. So I simply put it as guided online intercultural learner-to-learner contact, and the shape and the format of that contact does vary. It is also known as telecollaboration, online intercultural exchange, collaborative online international learning, or COIL, international online learning, global network learning. These are almost synonymous, but they're not always exactly the same. There are sometimes small differences between these different models, but virtual exchange is definitely not distance education. It is not online teaching. It is not blended teaching. It is not virtual mobility. So that phrase is usually confused, virtual mobility and virtual exchange. In virtual mobility, students from one institution, just like physical mobility, think of Erasmus, you study in one institution and you go to another institution in another country for a couple of months and take classes from that other institution. When it's virtual mobility, you are in one country and you then attend learning and teaching in another institution in another country online. Yeah, but it is not virtual exchange. For virtual exchange, students in both institutions stay in their own schools or institutions, and they come together online to do things together. So it's not taking courses from an international university, but it is actually connecting together. If you're just taking courses from another institution, it is virtual mobility, really. It should not be in competition with physical mobility either. Some people tend to compare virtual exchange with study abroad experiences. We think that it's not that. They're just different, inherently different experiences. Most colleagues in virtual exchange also don't see it as an emergency tool to be considered only in times of limited travel or pandemics. I would argue that it is an educational tool which should be an integral part of foreign language education programs and other programs perhaps, and as part of internationalization at home strategies. So could you, given this background on what virtual exchange is and is not, could you just type in chat whether you have organized a virtual exchange for your students, and if you are a student, whether you have taken part in a virtual exchange or not, if you don't have teaching experience yet. So a quick yes or no would do. And Fatma Hocam, if your students are there wanting to type, they can come across to the, come near to the keyboard to type, or you can type it in for themselves. This is just to have an idea of your experience. Oh, Nazlı Ceren, hello, hi, by the way. You were trying to connect to the audio when I recognized you were in.
Hi, how are you?
I'm okay, thank you. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. It's so nice to see you today.
So nice to see you too. I'm very happy, very pleased to see new people. So fantastic. Quite a few people have had experience of virtual exchange within this definition. So it's wonderful to see. And if there are things that I could talk about that match your experiences or that contradict your experiences, please do interrupt and do contribute to what you think. Okay. Internationalization at home, what is it? We always talk about internationalization at home. Because global education and global citizenship is becoming more and more important in our educational systems. It is the process of integrating an international, intercultural, or the global dimension, and it's the key area for education and intercultural communication, because successful internationalization can contribute to the quality and relevance of our education. And Sue Robson and colleagues at Newcastle University have a specific focus on internationalization at home, and they have developed kind of a tool that will allow you to audit whether your programs are international enough or not. It doesn't only look at whether there are international partnerships, but it also looks at kind of the curricula and the contents. For example, do you have any case studies for if you're teaching language teaching? Do you have any case studies of teaching languages from other countries? Do you have readings from other countries and not just from the West, from the UK or from the US written in English? Do you have any, for example, any reading in your content from France, from Africa, from South America? So internationalization at home is a broader concept than just having learner-to-learner exchanges. I should have updated this. It has been published. So with two other colleagues of mine, we looked at staff perspectives in how internationalization at home looks in China, and how virtual exchange can work, what are the challenges and barriers, and it is in the Journal of Virtual Exchange. So if you're interested in what perspectives there are from different countries, you can have a look. Most research currently reports what happens in the West, and there is not much from the global South or the global East. So more research is emerging from Turkey, which is really nice to see, and it does contribute a lot to what we do. But even then, most of those exchanges are again with Western partners, either European partners or the US. So it would be really, really nice to see how we actually connect with other parts of the world. So what is the value and role of virtual exchange for international at home? It has been evidence in the literature that it can be part of the physical classroom, or it can be part of the pre-mobility exchanges and experience to give the learners before they go abroad. It is usually seen as a more environmentally sustainable, accessible, equitable, and meaningful multinational experiences. Virtual exchange does support meaningful interaction in learners of different lingual-cultural backgrounds. They can develop digital competencies, but also learners can develop soft skills like self-esteem, curiosity, intercultural sensitivity, which actually are not soft skills in the workplace. They are key skills and core skills of in terms of whether you would be a successful colleague working well with others in international groups. And I think that part, in terms of relationships in categories of us and them, and how we perceive others and how we reduce those barriers on kind of stereotyping and having prejudices towards them, not us, is also really important. It does change people's global perspectives. Well, at least the research so far evidences that it does. And in teacher education, which is the background to the data that I'm going to show today, there is interest in virtual exchange in initial language teacher education programs, growing interest, because it allows pre-service teachers to discover, experience and reflect on their own techno-pedagogical skills in authentic linguistic and intercultural skills, but it also gives them a feeling of inclusion in social and professional communities, especially for the 21st century classrooms. So it is a great opportunity for to give learners that experience of experiential learning, so learning by doing. If you participate as a pre-service teacher in virtual exchange, then you experience it at first hand, and obviously then you will be able to have ideas on how you should organize your virtual exchanges for your own students when you graduate. So that's kind of the basis of virtual exchange in teacher education. And here's an overview of the data. This was, we've been doing this over 4 years with TED University, with Zeynep Bilki. Last year, this year, not last year, we've also done an exchange with Asu, what's her surname? Asuman in Hacettepe. Not Hacettepe, Ankara.
Aşık hocam, I guess.
Asuman Aşık, yes. Oh, I'm really sorry, I forgot her surname. My memory is sometimes really bad. So we've done one and we're looking at intercultural sensitivity with her. But as I said, this implementation, both implementations are based on experiential practice in online intercultural exchange. The cohorts are usually very similar. So in Turkey, the Turkish cohorts usually are 99% home students, they are Turkish students. So for them, the experience is definitely internationalization at home. So they're not traveling abroad, but they're having international experiences in Turkey. Whereas with my students who are taking the technology enhanced language learning or computer assisted language learning module, most of our students are 99-98% international, and they're largely Chinese. So they are here in study abroad for a year, and they're also then experiencing international experiences online. So their experiences are quite sometimes a bit different from what the other students, what Turkish students experience are. So it's double international for those students. But apart from that, kind of the programs are usually similar for year 3 and 4 students in the UK. Our masters here are 1 year. And we do have a bit more of a research focus, but some of them don't have any pedagogical background at all into language teaching. So we do cover a lot of the language teaching pedagogies and background. One of the most difficult things, again, to identify, especially if you want to have synchronous activities, I said time zones is a challenge. And for any kind of activity, academic calendars is a huge challenge. So for example, if we were to do an exchange in the spring semester, we get maximum 6 weeks. Some years we only get 4 weeks because there is a 4 weeks of break, Easter break in April here, whereas in Turkey we don't. And then the beginning and the start dates also, although they're very similar, it's starting around February, ending in May, June. Those few weeks of overlap are very difficult to get to because our semesters are 11 weeks, not 14 weeks. So sometimes it's difficult to have longer periods of exchanges. And especially this is a further challenge if you're going to have your students interact with universities from the global south, because obviously their seasons are the other way around. So they would start their kind of the academic year not in September or October, but they will start in February. And then how do you find those overlapping weeks to run the exchanges? It's one of the biggest challenges, actually. Those practical elements are quite important. So we had 6 weeks of overlap most of the time, but because the students are quite busy, we kind of thought we would design 3 tasks and give each task 2 weeks. The first week always starts with introductions on a Padlet to give students a bit more confidence of meeting each other, and they can have a relaxed environment to introduce themselves. Task 2, we designed, we asked them to design their and express their group identity, find a group identity, get to know each other more, and use Zoom and Google Slides in smaller groups. And in the third task, we actually ask them to reflect on illiteracy and illiteracy skills and evaluate the tools they have used in the virtual exchange and reflect on these in Zoom. And at the end of each task, they wrote their reflections in e-portfolios. And those e-portfolios become real great source for research data to understand learners' perspectives. Every year they've liked it so far. We've received quite positive responses. They say it's a great experience to connect with people from different cultures. They really like the fact that people can get together, although they're not physically in the same place. They have a virtual place that they feel together. They say it encourages virtual exchange, encourages respectful engagement, a phrase that I really, really like. They also realize how important it is to be polite and understanding. And I also like this quote a lot. One person's normal is not necessarily another person's normal. And unless you have these intercultural, international exchanges, it's very difficult to swap your perspective. I don't know you're into Marvel comics and Marvel movies. Well, we just watched Doctor Strange, where it's all about multiple universes and parallel universes. And in one of them, they're crossing the street, and people cross the street when it's red lights rather than the green light. So green means stop, red means go. So it's a very simple, basic example of how normal changes and depends on where you're from based on your cultural and sociocultural background and understandings. Although I hope universally we all cross the street in green, otherwise, it would lead to kind of chaos maybe. There are different ways of crossings on the streets. Like if you go to Japan, or you might have seen it in some of the movies, they have this huge big crossing point where people cross that in a very orderly fashion. I can't imagine in Turkey, it's such a big crossing, people would be that orderly, but it still works, doesn't it? We still manage to cross the street. So things work differently. And it's really nice that in virtual exchange, we're still able to offer students opportunities where they can understand that there are different normalities and that we should not generalize for stereotypes, obviously. So the data set for this presentation comes from the 2018 cohort, the first cohort. We've actually managed to write this up and a paper, one of the articles has now been accepted in recall. Hopefully it will be out by the end of the year. And we have submitted another one to Language Learning and Technology. Went through the first reviews. So fingers crossed, we'll see how it goes, which is where we talk more about the self-representations than the multimodal data. So you should be able to read about this study soon. So we had 84 individual Padlet posts, 10 group presentations, 31 hours of Zoom recordings, and we haven't really watched or looked at all of them, not all the time. You usually, with qualitative analysis, have to choose specific Zoom recordings that are relevant. And that's where those portfolios are key for us, because we start from the portfolios based on the points in the interactions that the students reflect, thinking those points are the points that are salient and relevant to the individual students' experiences, and then look for those instances in the video data to zoom in on and do further analysis of those Zoom recordings. And today I'll be focusing on the Padlet posts and see what kind of multimodal self-representations there are on those Padlet posts. So the research question is, how do teacher trainees use multimodal resources to represent the self? And I define identity from the performance approach, that identity is a form of socially meaningful practice, and increased multimodality in digital spaces, can destabilize situated identities of language learners and can position those adept at multimodal communication as competent and capable communicators. We will come back to this towards the end when we talk about multimodal self-expression and multimodal literacies and the kind of power it gives certain learners with certain skills. And I had written elsewhere that to successfully establish an online social presence, because if you're communicating virtual exchange as a learner, as a participant, you want to be able to express yourself well. And I have argued that language learners should engage in digital communication to learn to fully employ all aspects of their communicative repertoires and all aspects of their multiple identities for successful interactions. Very briefly, in terms of methodology, I really like Jeff Bezemer and Günter Kress's book, 2016 book on multimodality and learning and teaching. Unfortunately, Günter Kress passed away a couple of years ago, but Jeff Bezemer is still in UCL and still producing very good work on social semiotics. If you are interested in social semiotics, I would also recommend Rodney Jones, who is in University of Reading. There is Elisabetta Adami in Leeds. There is Maria Grazia Sindoni in Italy. So there are a few interesting people to read if you want to learn more about social semiotics. Do get in touch with me if you want a reference, so I'll be happy to share. Social semiotics studies meaning in a socio-cultural context, and it's a method of analyzing multimodal communication. The key premise is that all signs we make, all meanings we make are motivated, and semiotic modes have different meaning potentials, and people who use these modes choose the specific modes for their aptness, so for their appropriateness within the social, cultural, historical, and geographical landscape. And all modes come with affordances. Well, Jeff Bezemer was actually questioning the affordances of the concept of affordances last week at another seminar. So you might take a different perspective on those, but it is a term that has been used quite a lot in terms of the capabilities of different modes for meaning making. Sign making, design, and transformative engagement are some of the key terminologies in social semiotics as well. And I'll be talking about a bit of transformation, transduction, and mimesis throughout the analysis. Transformation basically means expressing the same meaning in the same mode, but with different resources. For example, if you ask your learners to write a poem of a novel they read, then it's transformation from prose to poetry. Transduction is when you change the mode. So if you ask the learners to draw a picture of the novel they read, then it's transduction because they're changing from written language to picture. And mimesis is acting out. So when you ask them to read Shakespeare and then act it out, act the play out, then it is mimesis. So very, very quickly, what about representing the self? So here I will be talking about Padlet posts and what we called a typical post. It looks like this. So there is a salutation, there is talks about likes and dislikes and pets. There are good wishes, emoticons, lots of emoticons, especially from the Turkish students. And we did see lots of pretty pictures of the self. And if we did a kind of a Google search on what a good profile picture looks like, you do find that quite a lot of the example images include expressions very similar to what you see here, like in a kind of a reclining position and representing the descriptions that are here. So for example, she's saying, I like the vintage style. And you do see that vintage style with these pompons and lights on the wall, and it is represented here. So she also talks about her cat, Murul, and you do see the cat here. She likes that she's drinking coffee a lot. We do have the coffee cup. So she is able to use transduction in expressing herself, not just in the written word, but she's also able to choose the apt picture, which indicates to us her semiotic agility in this sense. But we also had what we called power posts. So two students, one from the UK and one from Turkey, kind of posted these for their self-representations. So we do see them with an important figure in linguistics. On the left, we see the person with Paul Sedals, and on the right, we see the person with Stefan Krashen. What is interesting from this Turkish person's self-introduction is that she says, I look pretty different. Here is a photo with Stephen Crescent from a conference I attended 3 years ago. So she says, this is not me. I don't look like this person anymore, but I still prefer to represent myself as somebody who rubs shoulders with important linguists in the field. And she's able to say, I go attend academic conferences, I'm professional, I'm different from you. I'm kind of maybe intellectual. So all those meanings can be embedded in these posts. So you have the picture of the self with an influential professor. So in a way, if you look at Rodney Jones's work, these pictures, selfies here tell us, don't look at me, look at who I am with. So I'm presenting a relational identity. I'm not saying this is who I am. I'm saying these students are saying I am who I am with, who I am interacting with. So it's a different representation of identity. I do like this short video, and I can't remember whether I've shared my audio while I shared this screen, but if you can't hear the video, I will reshare again. So there is a lot of displays of intercultural affinity that we can observe in virtual exchanges, and this is one of them. This was one of the UK students who was in Newcastle, and she herself is Italian. And what she posted, everyone posted a picture, she posted a video, and she had the most number of likes on Padlet. She had 13 likes, but she also had the most number of comments, which are not there. So she posted a picture and she posted a video, both of them. And this is what she wrote on the right-hand side, what she wrote in her portfolio. So in her Padlet, she introduced herself like she normally does, and then she attached this video, walking in a market. So this market is Granger Market, which is a very traditional place, like a spice bazaar really, in the Grand Bazaar in Istanbul, but it's not fancy. It's one of the places where people don't go anymore. It used to be very popular, but it's not anymore. But there are new shops that are being set up, which are interesting. And she says, here's a picture of me in Istiklal in Istanbul, blissfully eating a Turkish bagel simit. Again, we see transduction with the simit, with her blissful smile. If you've been in Istiklal, you would recognize the street. You even see the Turkish flags in the background. So she's able to say, I have lived experience of where you are, so I can relate to you. And this is the video. Let's see whether you can hear. If you can't hear, can you please turn on the microphone and tell me? Yeah? Okay, let's see.
The market now. It's one of my favorite places in Newcastle. It's a quite big market, it's in the city center, and I like it because they sell fresh fruits and vegetables and they're quite cheap. I know it doesn't look so exciting from this video probably, but I really like it because I think it's an authentic place. And oh, a Turkish street food restaurant. I've never been there. Oh, now I'm going to have some good pizza. Here they make very good pizza. Bye.
So I hope you were able to hear what she was saying. It's quite interesting that it's a very authentic, impromptu video. So it doesn't look like she's planned things, and you feel that she hasn't planned it when she says, oh, here's a Turkish corner shop. I hadn't noticed that before. So it does relate that authentic feeling and authentic communication. And she's going to her favorite Italian pizza place where they say it's good pizza. And she is in Newcastle in Granger Market. So she is able to express that authentic experience, and we see the world through her eyes as she walks through with the camera, and she can depict herself as a multilingual and a multicultural person. And here is her self-expression, where we see that she's actually aware of these choices, that it's not coincidental. She has made appropriate choices and considerate choices, both in terms of which channels and which modes that she has chosen, and in terms of what the images represent. However, not all students had the same level of engagement or the same level of self-representation. This one again was one of the UK participants. And when we look at this student's post, it's kind of similar, kind of a bit about the background, a bit about what they like, and even some personal things like I live in Shanghai with my mom, I love cooking, I came to Newcastle, I find myself gifted in cooking because, you know, with the British who don't have any cuisine as such, so realized how good they are at cooking. So it's not a bad post, it's quite intimate and open and similar, but it only had 2 likes. And they said in their reflections, I posted one of my favorite picture under my introduction and I thought people would like it, but apparently it's not charming enough to attract others. So it wasn't the same, this general beautiful view didn't have the same effect as that typical post or the power post or the other I have your experience post. And it's quite interesting why it didn't have the same level of attraction. They then said sharing photos and videos is the most effective way to convey meanings. This comes from a Saudi student from Newcastle who posted a picture in Newcastle with the Newcastle Tower in the back. Again, in terms of what's being written in content, it's very similar and engaging, but they weren't able to show their faces. And we see that they were aware that they didn't want to share the Facebook photo because of privacy reasons and because of political reasons. Basically, Saudi women are not allowed to show their faces in social media. And although this was a closed public post, you never know who's going to take a screenshot and share it elsewhere. So she's quite concerned of what she can do. And she says, I admire people who share their personal photos and let me trust them. Photos are build a good image of personality. They're fantastic and very useful in expressing who you are, and it changes your ability to make new relationships. But unfortunately, due to political reasons, she cannot avail herself of these modes and of these opportunities. So when you're setting up your virtual exchange, perhaps this is one of the key elements of which modes we're going to allow students to use, which modes we're going to let them represent themselves in, and which modes they can and cannot use, and the implications of these in terms of equal relationships. So what this data shows us that students have differential symbolic skills. Claire Crouch says language is not simply a tool for communication. Symbolic power struggles underlie any speech act, discourse move, or verbal interaction, be it in face-to-face, online, or political debates. So language gives us power. Our ability to express ourselves better determines who gets heard, who gets listened to. You would see now on social media, now that everyone can have a voice, everyone posts lots of things and lots of opinions, but only some of those get picked and be engaged with and responded to. If you don't have those skills, then these students and these people without those skills are at risk of being marginalized and not being heard. So in higher education, it is absolutely essential that we offer our students opportunities to practice and improve their digital intercultural communication skills, not just intercultural and international education and those skills, but also how they do them digitally, which can be different from face-to-face intercultural communication. So is there freedom or complexity? Yes, there is freedom. Freedom from challenges due to unequal linguistic competencies, because you can express yourself multimodally when it's digital. It's not just what you say, but the pictures, the videos you share, and all of those can actually give you freedom to express yourself, especially if your language skills are not great. But it also adds complexity, because if you lack those necessary digital communication skills and semiotic competencies, no matter how strong your language is in the traditional form, your lexical and grammatical strengths are, then you are missing out. So we need both. And virtual exchange as an approach in internationalization at home seemingly offers equitable and accessible experiences. That's what the literature sends us. But when we actually look at it, is it really equitable? Does it actually give everyone equal opportunities and equal access? like the Saudi student had, who wasn't able to show their face? And what are the digital literacies, multimodal communicative competencies, and semiotic skills of these students, which would influence, if not determine, their virtual exchange experiences? In terms of some of the questions in the title and my answers to those, is virtual exchange the new normal for internationalization in higher education? There is a lot of increasing activity in the UK, in Europe, in USA, in South America, some in Africa, and some in China as well, and Japan. But we are not yet at the level of what Stephen Bax would call normalization. It's not yet something that everyone does very easily. We are still learning the best tasks, the best modes and technologies to interact with. What are the opportunities and benefits? There are many new studies evidencing increasing foreign language skills, interculturality, understandings, digital skills, and employability opportunities. And there are various networks that support the practice. Uni-collaboration, the one I mentioned at the beginning. There is also SUNY COIL, SOLIA, Stevens Initiative. There is CLIck, IURD, Phobia, and many others that that I can kind of probably tell you about and after this talk. What are the challenges? As we said, access to infrastructure is still a huge challenge, especially if you want to do anything with Africa, South America, or South and Central Asia. In Africa, especially, internet is a huge problem. So having asynchronous video conferencing exchanges are difficult. And that means we're not understanding what their normality is. We're only seeing the world from a very small perspective, and we're not able to reach out. Inclusion is also a problem. Virtual exchange is usually only available to specific groups of students who take courses and modules from interested lecturers who want to set up these exchanges, but there are so many others who cannot engage with those exchanges. So Study Abroad and Erasmus is run by the International Office, and anyone from any discipline and any program can join those. So perhaps virtual exchange needs to become an institutional practice rather than localized practice. And as I kind of tried to show you, that not all students have digital communication and semiotic skills at the same level. So when we talk about acuity, we have to think of not only access to internet and technologies, but also communication and semiotic skills. So to finish off, I don't want to end in arguments and kind of claims, but I want to end in questions for you to think about and for us to discuss. So if we want to facilitate further intercultural and international exchanges and make these part of our global and international agendas, how can we enable opportunities for multimodal self-expression? How can we consider students' differential skills and competencies for digital communication, and how can we support those who do not already come with strong skills in these areas? How can we pay attention to intercultural sensitivity? So quite a lot of the people don't want to set up exchanges because they're concerned about conflict management. What happens if they're not polite and kind, but somebody offends one of the students? What are you going to do? And those exchanges sometimes take place out of your control. So as a lecturer, as a teacher, you have to embrace losing control a little bit, but also read about conflict management maybe. How do you prepare that ground for respectful engagement? And how do we create safe spaces for intercultural dialogue and understanding? And what do safe spaces mean? Do they mean that we avoid those sensitive topics? We avoid talking about religion and politics and, you know, things that might create conflict? Or do we create brave spaces where we enable discussion around those topics without letting people, you know, without being offensive, really? How do we get to that? How do we give students those perspectives? And in the end, how do we ensure equality, diversity, and inclusion? So thank you very much. Good luck. And I'll stop there. Hopefully that still gives us a bit of time for question and answer. Yeah.
Müge Hocam, thanks a lot for this extremely enjoying, fruitful, and at the same time practical and inspiring speech. I believe we all feel energized even at this hour of Wednesday. Now we can have questions, and you can use the raise hand button or drop your questions down in the chat box for me to read if you don't prefer turning on your camera or microphone.
Mügeciğim, how are you?
I'm okay, thank you. How are you? Good to see you here.
Thank you for being here, and I would like to thank Bartın University Education Faculty for bringing you here. It's nice, and you want to see me as well. Here is yeah. When I saw, I just wanted to say hello, and then made some comments for everyone to think about. I think it's really interesting to talk about this promoted identity. I call it actually that people, identify themselves with other people, though with good intentions, as I said. And maybe this is a great analysis that you did of this digital discourse, I must say. And I also think it's interesting to notice how such digital multimodal discourse helps people learn and develop and find themselves a space within the macro ELT community. And that was the idea when I was, do you remember, holding these conferences in Istanbul where teachers come together and they meet people, they talk with people. And Gary was actually talking about the role of these conferences in teachers' life, that they are developing different strengths of their identities when they come to conference, negotiate with people. It wasn't multimodal, but it was, because we had these interactive posters including visuals, audio, video as well. We tried these things. But it's interesting. Thank you very much for your talk. And if you have some comments on my comments, I'll be happy to hear. Yeah.
Well, thank you. I mean, wish you given us the word promoted identity. We could have put it in the
exactly.
paper.
Just think about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think we kind of call it self-representation because identity is a huge area, and I've got co-authors Miriam and Zeynep, and I think we don't necessarily feel too comfortable going into the area of identity and kind of classifying things as identities, but we kind of focused on how the posts themselves are different. And I was at one of those conferences you organized, Kenan Hocam. It was wonderful. Yeah, it was definitely multimodal. So in terms of multimodal communication, all communication is multimodal. Yeah, exactly. It's just online, we're looking at the digital multimodality and some of the different modes that we can also bring in. So we don't necessarily walk about with our kind of album of photographs, but we do walk around with our phones. So it's sometimes easy to bring in those digital elements into our face-to-face interactions as well. So yeah, that was fantastic.
One thing we did, not in Istanbul, but in Izmir, was one of the instructors from Marmara University. I suggested her bringing the data in the iPad. And the people who wanted to access data, they had the ability to listen to the data that she was presenting as codes or themes or categories, but they had the liberty of accessing all this data. So the iPad was there, the presentation on paper on the wall was there, and they were just discussing, okay, listen to the student here if you want to access the quotations or access the exact data. That was something I think we developed as an idea to make it more and more authentic, more transparent for people to share the data actually. Yeah. Just keep in mind.
Yeah, those integrated communication platforms, augmented realities, kind of more of the virtual reality and VR, those headsets are going to become more of our lives, I guess. Kids do like them. I don't like the headset, and adults usually feel queasy with being in that virtual space. But it's interesting.
But I think my example was from 7-8 years ago. It's not new. So we were trying to integrate digital resources to share the research resources and data as well. Yeah, good. Nice to see you. Thank you very much. And that's all from me.
Are there any questions?
If there is no yet, maybe I can ask a question to our students, Hocam, not you. They have experienced a virtual exchange last term, and maybe some of the volunteers might want to talk about how they feel about this experience. I don't know, in terms of intercultural dialogue, did they feel equal? Did they feel some, I don't know, inclusion or internationalization? Is there anyone who wants to reflect on it regarding Müge Hocam's talk? Maybe they might want to think about it a little bit. I don't want to spend a lot of silent time. So may I ask my question if there's no one? Oh, okay. Hocam, as you already emphasized, virtual exchange practices give students a first-hand experience of online learning experience, interacting and collaborating with people from different countries, cultural backgrounds, which might hopefully develop their intercultural competence in turn. However, there are some criticisms about a superficial level of engagement with difference with limited change in their intercultural awareness or limited success in the development of their intercultural competence, let's say. What might be the reasons for this dispreferred outcomes? How can we overcome these? Actually, this is a hard question, I know, but I just wonder your ideas.
I suppose there could be a few factors that are involved. One of them could be a lack of reflection element. So if the students are only engaging in those interactions but not reflecting on how and in which ways it changes them, that kind of might be lowering the impact and the effects of being in intercultural communication. It's so easy to be part of interactions and not actually think of what you see and what you think about people. So the reflective practice, to me, has to be an integrated part. It could be the tasks, which could be another element that has an impact. If the tasks are not necessarily allowing the learners to unpack those differences, or if the teacher is only concerned around creating safe spaces but not brave spaces, if they're not talking about the differences, they come across and come out of the exchanges and say, oh, we all like sweets, we all like baklava, and you know, it's always folklore and kind of the traditional food and fashion, the 3 Fs as they call it. So that could be another reason why the topics may not be relevant. A third factor could be whether it's only group exchanges or one-to-one exchanges, and whether the students are able to all participate at similar levels in the groups. Group work is always difficult to maintain, and sometimes we see in some of the group interaction, 2 students dominate the interaction and don't necessarily care for inclusiveness across the whole group. And some students don't get to say anything, don't get to express themselves, not because they don't want to. Maybe they're a bit shy, they're a bit more anxious, they need a bit more encouragement, maybe because they don't feel they have the space left from the dominant students. So it's all about encouraging those who are quiet and giving some roles or responsibilities to those students who are a bit more dominant. So it's quite difficult for the teacher to know the group dynamics unless they have access to those self-reflective portfolios so that they can read about the exchanges and what's going on in the groups, or have video recordings and are able to watch and observe some of the interactions or pop in and out of those group exchanges so that they can observe these differences. There could be all sorts of other reasons, and it could be just because we are focused on intercultural competence. The concept of intercultural competence is a bit like language proficiency. So if you had 4 or 3 short points of interaction or very few lessons of language, you can't expect the students to be proficient. They would go from, A1 to maybe A2 if you're lucky out of a semesters of learning and teaching. So because it's very difficult and limited, unless they become a part of the whole institutional perspective in education, if they're only experiencing very brief moments of a couple of weeks of interaction, achieving intercultural competence is kind of a difficult thing to achieve. And kind of the field of intercultural communication is evolving towards the concept of interculturality rather than aiming for intercultural competence. So maybe what we're looking for in terms of development is not intercultural competence. Maybe it's not a very useful concept to explore. Maybe we should look at how people change in terms of their intercultural sensitivities, in terms of their global citizenship, or in terms of confidence, or even open-mindedness. Some concepts that are slightly different from intercultural competence. So sometimes it's the concepts that we work with in research and how we operationalize them and how we look at things. So interculturality would not see competence as something to be achieved, but you would look at how actually participants interact and evolve together and create that space that is the intercultural space, that is the trans space rather than interspace as well. So if you read a bit more interculturality of the recent works on interculturality, you would see that perhaps we're looking at the wrong evidence, looking for the wrong evidence. But I'm sure there are other challenges involved. So yeah, please do contribute if you think there are other elements of impact.
Thank you very much, Hocam. I have a related question actually. You mentioned global citizenship, and in Odo's 2020 paper that you showed, he mentions transnational model of virtual exchanges, and he states that it is designed to foster global citizenship instead of intercultural competence or skills. How can we differentiate between those two skills? Is it, or how it is different from the previous models of virtual exchanges? Can you talk about them a little bit?
I think if you want to read about Robert Dowd's categorization, the best would be to go and read the paper. I think it's such a big concept to identify differences. We probably don't have the time now, but we can perhaps meet again to talk more about the concepts, what they mean, how they differ. Intercultural competence is very much of a second language acquisition or second language interculturalization concepts. And Claire Cramps even proposed the concept of semiotic competence, which received some criticism as well as support. So perhaps there are different things we need to look at and discuss. But I don't think there is enough time for me to talk about global citizenship and differences. That would make a fantastic paper that we would be very happy to then publish in the Journal of Virtual Exchange if you're interested in doing that.
That would be perfect, Hocam. Thank you very much. I'll stop myself here. Thank you.
So are there any questions or anyone who would like to say anything? Well, if it's no, we would like to thank once again Müge Hocam and everyone here joining us today.